On a recent video, I talked about reasons why some motorists seem to hate cyclists, and one of them was that in their view, cyclists habitually jump red traffic lights. Of course, if I said now, after seeing a couple of cars jump a red lights, that all drivers jump red lights, it would be an insult to every driver I know, including me, and of course, complete nonsense. I'm expanding on this subject today by suggesting that in certain circumstances, cyclists should be allowed to cycle through red lights. I stress that my opinion and suggestions here require a law change. Don't ever run a red light while it remains illegal. Now, before any motorists watching get angry or switch off and disgust at this point, bear with me. It's not as crazy and as biased as it seems. Before tackling scenarios where this might work, we need to establish the why. And surely the why needs to be safety, followed by improving traffic flow. In that previous video, which I'll link to at the end, I showed this clip, which shows first of all a car speeding up to drive through a red light, followed by a guy on a bike coming to a halt and then proceeding on red. Quite rightly, I criticise both because both are wrong to do what they did under current law. But looking at what they did from a safety perspective, the car weighing probably around 1.5 tons and accelerating through the lights, no doubt breaking the speed limit if he was already doing the speed limit, so 30 miles per hour or more, and his brake lights show that he was slamming his brakes on as soon as he was through the lights. The cyclist, on the other hand, almost comes to a halt. He checks to see if all is clear, then makes his manoeuvre. Him and his bike would weigh in the region of 200 pounds. Given that particular set of circumstances, I would argue that only one of them posed any danger to anyone else. So, keeping on the safety angle, we clearly need to be looking at the safety of people in order of vulnerability, and at traffic lights there are generally 4: pedestrians, cyclists, motorcyclists, and drivers of motor vehicles, in that order. Now, London seems to be the hotbed of controversy with this, so it's been well researched and shows us this. Of pedestrians injured in London in a collision caused by red light jumping, only 4% involved cyclists, whereas 71% occurred when a car driver jumped a red light and 13% when a motorcyclist did. I'd also argue the severity of the injuries will differ greatly because of the speed, weight and mass of the car compared to a person riding a bike. The noise from certain media sources try to influence people into thinking that running red lights is primarily a violation by cyclists, but just 4% of accidents suggests the danger posed by motor vehicles is much greater. This Department of Transport statistic shows that pedestrian deaths caused by the perpetrator not stopping at a red light over a 10-year period was 42, and just 1 was a cyclist. Before moving on, let me be quite clear. Although I'm saying that for reasons I'll come to, proceeding on red could eventually be acceptable, I am not for a minute excusing this kind of reckless, selfish and stupid behaviour on a bike. I'm also aware of accusations I might get that these proposals are biased in favour of cyclists. I did a video a few months ago on the highway code changes and how they affected cyclists and got plenty of angry motorist comments. This was one, and is typical of the kind of thing you see on social media. He angrily points out that cyclists are the 1% of road users that are being pandered to, yet these same people claim that cyclists are the root cause of all road chaos. It clearly doesn't add up. And this exaggerated nonsense extends to accusations relating to red lights. At the time of the highway code changes, I spotted this quote in the media, saying that the highway code changes gave cyclists carte blanche to go sailing through red lights. So there lies the bias, because nothing in the highway code changes referred to anything about red lights. It was just totally made up to rile up the anti-cyclist lobby. Whereas my thoughts here have no bias at all, merely opinion based on safety and backed up by fact. An additional safety issue is how safe the cyclist is waiting at a red light alongside a large motor vehicle. According to the Department of Transport, 75% of all cyclist casualties are at junctions where everyone's had to stop and wait with varied levels of impatience to get going again. It's no wonder then that the national cycling charity believes that some cyclists jump red lights as they feel safer moving into the open space at the junction rather than waiting alongside fellow road users who often accelerate hard into the junction once the light goes green. Cyclists are very vulnerable standing still alongside or just in front of large vehicles at traffic lights. And if anyone is still seeing bias here, think on this. If a motorist makes a wrong or dumb move and collides with a cyclist, the cyclist is the one most likely to be hurt or killed. If it's the cyclist making the wrong move, it's still the cyclist who will suffer. Even a collision by a cyclist with a pedestrian will probably result in a fall from the bike and injury. No sensible cyclist is going to make a decision other than one that keeps them safe. Any law change that legally takes cyclists away from vehicles raring to get going again at junctions is going to be a move in the right direction and take away the risk of what's known in the UK as a left hook, when a vehicle turns left, particularly lorries, not seeing the cyclist alongside, sometimes resulting in pretty horrific injuries. The advanced stop lines or bike boxes at traffic lights do help that separation and definitely are a step in the right direction. Yet sadly, some car drivers complain about these, acting as indignant as you might be when somebody jumps ahead of you in the queue when you're queuing up for a burger or something. Rule 178 of the Highway Code says that drivers at lights should allow cyclists, including any moving or waiting alongside you, enough time and space to move off when the green signal shows. How often does this happen in reality? When most urban cyclists experience is cars moving off like their foot was poised on the accelerator on a Formula One starting grid. It does not really make the cyclist in front feel less vulnerable or confident that Rule 178 is going to be applied. To make any progress with more progressive changes, we absolutely need to help motorists understand. It's not about favoritism. It's not about you cyclists have carte blanche to do what you like. In a car, we need to stop seeing it as a competition. Stop trying to be first. Stop viewing getting in front of the bike, tractor, car, or whatever it is in front of you as the be-all and end-all of driving. We're not at Silverstone or Brands Hatch. It's about safety, plain and simple, which isn't easy to appreciate, I know, when you're sitting in the relative safety cocooned in the metal shell of a motor vehicle. I understand that. There are plenty of examples across the world of separate traffic lights for cyclists at junctions, which let the bikes go 10 to 15 seconds before vehicles do, keeping them visible and separate them from motorists on the junction. This is another step in the right direction. Where we really need to get to, though, is creating a situation in the UK where it's acceptable and legal for a cyclist to move through on red on some junctions if, after checking, it's perfectly safe for everyone for them to proceed. The USA have had this in some states for 40 years. Known as the Idaho Stop, because it first became law there in 1982, basically allows cyclists turning right, that would be turning left in the UK, to treat the light as a stop sign, then proceed on red if all is clear. In some states the rule exists only for lights where a sensor hasn't picked up the presence of a cyclist and there's no other traffic around to trigger the signal. In others, it allows them move on red at all times, providing it's safe to proceed. France began to allow this in Paris and other cities in 2015 at selected junctions identified by these signs. Interestingly, this was introduced primarily to improve traffic flow rather than as a safety initiative. So I'm confident that in addition to avoiding deaths and injury through lorries turning left and left hooking the cyclists, we can also improve traffic flow, which benefits everybody. I can imagine some motorists watching this will be thinking I'm trying to suggest something invented in cloud cuckoo land. Allowing cyclists to turn right or left on countries that drive on the left is a widespread thing throughout the world, and the UK really needs to get involved with this. This map is being collated by a chap called Jeff Gibson, shows we are fast becoming behind the times. And there have been additions since this was printed. Switzerland, for example, allowed cyclists to turn right on red just last year. As far as cycling straight on at traffic lights, this is less common and should never be considered, I don't think, at a crossroads where traffic is crossing over the cyclist in two different directions. At junctions like this though, well, this chap got short shrift from me, to be honest, in my last video because he was breaking the law. But bearing in mind everything I've put to you here, perhaps he was ahead of his time, because he only needs to look in one direction for traffic that isn't there, no pedestrians are present, and it's a perfectly safe manoeuvre. And in my view, we should be moving towards making that kind of manoeuvre legal. And just to remind you before you shout, I'm not including these numbskulls on what they're doing in this proposal. I'm not suggesting anyone does any of this where and while it's currently illegal to do so. I'm merely saying the highway code and laws should be modified to allow cyclists at certain junctions to proceed on red for the reasons I've highlighted, on the basis that if done correctly, it will harm no one, it will improve traffic flow, and the cyclist will be safer. It's not about cycling through a red light, so to hell with everybody else. It's about looking and going when it's clear. Just as it seems acceptable, after all, for a pedestrian to cross at traffic lights when they have a red light, when there's no traffic coming. Nobody complains about that, and most people do it. My proposal here really isn't much different to that. Pedestrian safety is paramount, of course. There will always be fools like these, just like there are fools driving cars. And no cyclist wants a collision with any vehicle, person or object. In 99% of cases, the only person a cyclist will harm by jumping a red light at the wrong time is themselves. I came across this in a post during my research, and it acts as simple rules for a cyclist moving through a red light when the pedestrian is present, if it becomes allowed. 1. Never do it at speed. 2. Never in front of a pedestrian, always pass behind them. 3. Make eye contact and make it clear that you know they have the right of way. And 4. Just don't be a dick. Here's a video which may be of interest if you watched this far. Please like and subscribe if this has been useful. Happy cycling, happy motoring, and please prioritise pedestrians along the way. I'll see you soon.